At dawn on the fifth day, 1,800 motorcycles lined her street like a river of steel and chrome. But to understand why, you need to go back 5 days earlier, when 80-year-old Dorothy Williams stood on her crumbling porch, holding an eviction notice with trembling hands. The paper said she had exactly 5 days. 5 days to vacate the house where she'd lived for 53 years. 5 days to pack 5 decades of memories. 5 days before the bank took everything she had left. Dorothy's fingers traced the faded paint on her porch railing. The wood was soft with rot, crumbling under her touch like old bones. The roof leaked in 7 places. She'd counted them last winter when she slept in the kitchen, because it was the only room warm enough. Her pension check, $372 monthly, barely covered food. The mortgage payment of $840 had been impossible for 18 months. She'd tried everything. Called the bank 17 times. Each time, the same cold voice answered, "Mrs. Williams, we've been patient. The foreclosure is final." Her neighbor, Patricia Henderson, watched from across the street with crossed arms and a satisfied smile. Patricia had started a petition 6 months ago. Dangerous Property Removal Initiative, she'd called it. 37 neighbors signed it without hesitation. Dorothy's house was an eyesore, Patricia claimed loudly at every opportunity. It brought down property values. It made the neighborhood look poor. The sky that morning was wrong. Dorothy had lived through 60 tornado seasons in Oklahoma. She recognized that copper-green color, that thick electric feeling in the air that made your skin prickle. Her radio crackled with urgent warnings. Meteorologists predict the strongest tornado in 30 years. Category EF5 possible. Seek shelter immediately. Dorothy looked at her basement door. The hinges were rusted orange, screaming when she pulled. The wooden steps were broken. Third one missing entirely. Fifth one cracked down the middle. But the basement was deep, built in 1947 when her husband Thomas was still alive and strong. Before the war took pieces of his soul, he never got back. She heard them before she saw them, a deep rumble growing louder with each heartbeat. 25 motorcycles rounded the corner, engines roaring like caged thunder. The riders wore black leather that creaked and smelled of oil and rain, covered in patches and chains that clinked with each movement. Skull insignias gleamed on their backs, catching the strange green sunlight. The words, "Steel Pilgrims," arched across each jacket in silver thread that seemed to glow. Patricia Henderson rushed inside her house, slamming the door so hard the frame shook. Other neighbors pulled curtains closed with sharp snaps, windows locked with clicks that echoed down the empty street. One by one, the street emptied like water draining from a tub. The lead rider stopped directly in front of Dorothy's house. He was massive, 6 feet 4 inches tall, arms thick as tree trunks, covered in tattoos that told stories Dorothy couldn't read. A gray beard reached his chest, braided with leather cords. His eyes, though, were gentle, surprisingly kind. "Ma'am," his voice was surprisingly soft for such a large man. "We're caught out here. Storm's coming fast. Is there anywhere we could—" The tornado sirens began their awful wail, that rising, falling scream that meant run, hide, pray. Dorothy didn't hesitate, didn't think, didn't calculate risk, or worry about what Patricia would say or whether these strangers were dangerous. She just saw human beings who needed help. "Basement," she said firmly. "Through the kitchen. Stairs are broken. Watch your step on the 3rd and 5th. The biker's eyes widened with shock. "Ma'am, there's 25 of us. We can't all—" "Then you better hurry. Storm won't wait." The 25 bikers filed through Dorothy's kitchen like a parade of leather and metal and humanity. Their boots thundered on her worn linoleum. Boom, 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 a drumbeat of survival. The smell of rain and gasoline and leather filled her small house. Marcus Stone, the leader with the kind eyes, went last, his massive hand gentle on Dorothy's elbow as he helped her down the treacherous basement stairs. The basement was cramped, built for storing canned vegetables and Christmas decorations, not sheltering 25 huge men. They pressed shoulder to shoulder, leather creaking, breathing synchronized and shallow. Their motorcycles remained outside, helpless metal against what was coming. Through the single small window, the sky turned black-green, swirling like water going down a drain. "I'm Marcus," the leader said, voice barely above a whisper in the confined space. These are my brothers from Steel Pilgrims Motorcycle Club. Ma'am, we can't thank you enough for this." Dorothy waved her wrinkled hand dismissively. "Hush now, Storm's here." The sound started low, like a freight train in the distance, rumbling on tracks you couldn't see. Then louder, louder. The walls began to shake, dust raining from the ceiling in streams that made the men cough. The single bulb hanging from a wire swung wildly, casting crazy shadows that danced across tattooed faces. One of the younger bikers, couldn't have been more than 25 years old, smooth face beneath the tough exterior, looked absolutely terrified. His hands shook. His breathing came in short gasps. "Jake," Marcus called to him, voice calm and steady. "Breathe, brother. We're safe here. Dorothy's got us." Dorothy noticed Jake's hands trembling so violently his rings rattled. Without a word, without hesitation, she moved through the pressed bodies and took his massive tattooed hand in her small, wrinkled one. His hand could have crushed hers like paper, but it was shaking like a leaf. "First tornado, sweetheart?" Dorothy asked gently, like she was talking to one of her grandchildren. Jake nodded, unable to speak, eyes wide with primal fear. "Close your eyes," Dorothy instructed softly. "Think about something beautiful. Your mother's face, a sunrise you saw once, your favorite song. Anything but this noise. Just breathe with me." Above them, the world exploded into violence. Glass shattered with sounds like screaming. Wood splintered and cracked like breaking bones. Metal screamed as it twisted and tore. The tornado's roar was deafening, like standing inside a jet engine while it started, a sound so loud it stopped being sound and became pressure, became pain in your ears and chest. The house groaned and twisted above them. Something massive crashed, maybe the roof, maybe a wall, impossible to tell. The floor above them buckled. Plaster dust filled the air so thick they could taste it, gritty and chemical on their tongues. Dorothy held Jake's hand tighter, felt his pulse racing against her palm. She closed her own eyes and thought about Thomas, about his strong hands building this basement, about how he'd promised it would keep her safe. Even now, 32 years after his heart had stopped, he was still keeping that promise. It lasted 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Felt like 4 hours, felt like eternity compressed into moments. When silence finally came, it was absolute and eerie. No birds singing, no wind rustling, no cars passing, nothing. Just breathing and heartbeats and the sound of 26 people realizing they were alive. Marcus was first up the stairs. He pushed against the basement door. It wouldn't budge. 3 more bikers joined him, shoulders pressed together, muscles straining. On the count of 3, they shoved with everything they had. The door burst open and debris cascaded down the stairs. Wood, shingles, insulation, pieces of Dorothy's life tumbling past them. By the way, if this story has grabbed you so far, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. What happens next is something you absolutely won't want to miss. What they saw when they emerged stopped them cold, froze them mid-step. Dorothy's kitchen was gone. Just gone. Erased. Where her roof had been, there was open sky, blue and innocent and mocking. One wall stood intact, covered in family photos somehow untouched. The rest, scattered across what used to be her yard in pieces too small to recognize. Her refrigerator sat embedded in a tree 100 feet away, door hanging open. Her kitchen table was stuck upright in the middle of the street like someone had planted it there. Marcus helped Dorothy up through the debris and into the ruins. She stood among the wreckage of 53 years, silent, face unreadable. Her wedding photo, the one where Thomas looked so young and strong in his uniform, lay crushed under a support beam, glass shattered into diamonds. Thomas's purple heart medal, the one he'd been so proud of but never talked about, scattered in the mud alongside broken dishes and soaked books. But that wasn't the worst part. That wasn't what made Marcus's blood run cold. Patricia Henderson stood in her perfect, untouched yard across the street. Her colonial house didn't have a single shingle out of place, not one broken window, like the tornado had deliberately avoided it, and she was holding up her phone, filming, with a smile on her face that made Marcus want to. He clenched his fists, took a breath, controlled the rage building in his chest. "You let those criminals into the neighborhood," Patricia's voice carried across the street, loud enough for everyone to hear, pitched for maximum audience. "And look what happened. God's judgment, Dorothy. This is what you get for harboring dangerous people. Those bikers brought this curse on all of us. Marcus's jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. His brothers stirred behind him, angry muttering building. But Dorothy raised her hand gently, barely a movement. "It's all right," she whispered. "Let her talk." It wasn't all right. Nothing about this was all right. One by one, doors opened along the street. Neighbors who'd known Dorothy for 53 years stood on their porches, arms crossed, faces hard, judging. The Hendersons, all 5 of them lined up like a tribunal. The Martinez family, who Dorothy had fed countless times when money was tight. The Chens, whose mother Dorothy had cared for before she passed. Even young Sarah Peterson, whose children Dorothy had babysat for free, when Sarah lost her job and couldn't afford daycare. Not one person crossed the street to help. Not one hand reached out. Not one voice said, "Dorothy, are you okay?" Know why 95% of people fail the basic test of humanity? Because kindness requires courage, and courage is the rarest commodity in the world. Dorothy was about to learn just how rare it truly is. The tornado had carved a path of destruction exactly 6 blocks long and 2 blocks wide. Dorothy's house sat in the center, devastated, roof gone, walls collapsed. But Patricia Henderson's pristine colonial home, untouched, not a scratch, not a leaf out of place, the universe's cruelest joke, delivered with perfect timing. A black SUV pulled up, tires crunching on debris. Riverside Bank logo on the door in gold letters that caught the sunlight. A thin man in a gray suit stepped out carefully, avoiding puddles like they might stain his expensive shoes. Richard Knowles, the same bank officer who'd been calling Dorothy for 18 months, voice always cold and mechanical. "Mrs. Williams," he said, still not looking at her, eyes scanning the wreckage like he was appraising livestock. "I'm very sorry about this situation, but the eviction notice stands. Actually, given the extensive property damage and safety hazards, we're accelerating the timeline. You have 48 hours to vacate the lot. We'll have a demolition crew here Monday morning at 6 a.m. sharp." Dorothy swayed on her feet. Marcus caught her elbow, steadied her with surprising gentleness for such a large man. "Sir, her house just got destroyed by a tornado," Marcus said, voice tight with controlled fury that vibrated in his chest. "She nearly died. We all nearly died. And you're—" "Which makes it a safety hazard and liability issue," Knowles interrupted, finally looking at Marcus with barely concealed disgust. His eyes lingered on the tattoos, the leather, the skull patches. "The bank cannot allow hazardous structures to remain on foreclosed properties. 48 hours, Mrs. Williams. Non-negotiable." He climbed back into his SUV and drove away, never once asking if Dorothy was hurt, if she needed help, if she had anywhere to go. Dorothy stood in the ruins of 53 years. No house, no possessions, no time. 48 hours from sleeping on the streets. And the entire neighborhood, people she'd baked Christmas cookies for, whose children she'd taught to read when they struggled, whose pets she'd fed when they went on vacation. They all just watched. Some with satisfaction, some with indifference, none with compassion. Patricia Henderson was still filming, still smiling, already mentally calculating how much the empty lot would increase her property value. Marcus Stone watched this 80-year-old woman stand tall despite losing everything. Watched her show more grace under cruelty than he'd seen in 20 years of riding cross-country. Something broke inside him. Something fundamental shifted in his understanding of what honor meant. "Brothers," he said quietly, voice carrying authority that made all 24 men turn. "We need to talk. Now." The 25 bikers huddled 50 feet away, voices low. Dorothy couldn't hear their words, but she saw their faces. Saw Jake, the terrified young one, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. Saw the oldest biker, a gray-haired man with a scar cutting across his weathered face, nod solemnly like a judge pronouncing sentence. Marcus pulled out his phone. Dorothy heard fragments drifting on the wind. "Yeah, it's urgent. She saved 25 of our lives. Gave us shelter when her whole world was ending. House destroyed. Neighbors turned on her. We need the full brotherhood." He hung up. Walked to Dorothy with purpose in every step. "Ma'am, we need to leave now. Storm chasers coming, emergency crews, media. It's going to get chaotic. But I promise you, I swear on my father's grave, we're not done here. This isn't over." "Son, you don't owe me anything," Dorothy said, voice steady despite everything. "You needed help. I helped. That's what people are supposed to do." Marcus's eyes were fierce, burning with something Dorothy hadn't seen in decades: purpose. "Ma'am, you saved 25 lives today without hesitation. You're family now. And Steel Pilgrims protect family. That's not a courtesy. That's a blood oath." The motorcycles roared to life, creating a sound that made curtains twitch all down the block. 25 bikers rode away down the debris-scattered street, engines echoing off damaged houses. Patricia Henderson lowered her phone, satisfied. Good riddance. Monday, Dorothy would be gone. The dangerous element would be removed. Property values would stabilize and rise. She'd done her civic duty. She had absolutely no idea that 200 kilometers away, Marcus Stone was making phone calls that would shake the entire state. That word was spreading through chapters in 50 states like wildfire through dry grass. That a promise had been made, the kind bikers would die before breaking. Dorothy spent that night in a Red Cross shelter on 5th Street. Cot number 47, squeezed between a family of 6 with crying babies and an elderly man who coughed all night, wet rattling sounds that never stopped. She'd saved $7.32 from last month's pension check. That was everything. Everything she owned in the world fit in her pocket. The shelter worker, a tired woman named Linda with kind eyes and exhausted posture, handed her a plastic bag. Inside, travel-sized toothpaste, a toothbrush still in packaging, generic shampoo, and a donated change of clothes that smelled like someone else's laundry detergent. "You can stay 3 days maximum," Linda said, not unkindly, like she'd said these words 10,000 times before. "After that, we can help you apply for temporary housing programs, but I have to be honest. The wait list is currently 8 months long." 8 months. Dorothy would be on the streets in 45 hours when the 3-day limit expired. She lay on the thin cot, springs poking through the worn mattress into her hip, staring at ceiling tiles stained yellow from old water damage. 53 years of life, reduced to $7 and a plastic bag of donated items she'd never wanted. She thought about Thomas, about his hands building that house board by board after he came home from Vietnam, still waking up screaming some nights from things he wouldn't talk about. "Should have hired a real carpenter, Dorothy," he'd joked when the roof leaked the first time, arm around her waist, laughing despite the bucket-catching drips. "You're the only carpenter I need," she'd replied, meaning it with every fiber of her being. He'd passed 32 years ago, heart attack at 57 years old, too young, way too young, clutched his chest during breakfast and was gone before the ambulance arrived. And now even the house, his house, built with his hands and love, was gone too. This changed my entire understanding of what happens when systems fail the vulnerable. What you're about to learn will make you question everything you thought you knew about banks and neighborhoods. The next morning, Dorothy walked back to the lot. Maybe she could salvage something, a photograph, a keepsake, her mother's wedding ring, anything to prove she'd existed, that her life had mattered. The demolition notice was already posted on a metal stake driven into the ground. Big red letters like an accusation. "Hazardous structure, demolition, scheduled 0600 Monday, stay clear." Patricia Henderson stood in her perfect yard with 3 other neighbors, steam rising from coffee cups held like weapons, watching, waiting, theatrical in their judgment. "Morning, Dorothy," Patricia called out, voice dripping false sweetness like poisoned honey. "I called the city inspector myself yesterday. Had to, you understand. That pile of wood and nails is a danger to the whole block. Children play here. We have standards." Dorothy said nothing, began carefully picking through debris, hands moving slowly through pieces of her past. "Found anything valuable?" Patricia continued, performing for her audience. "Though I suppose at your age, memories are worth more than money. Such a shame you wasted your last dollars feeding those criminal bikers instead of paying your mortgage. Choices have consequences, Dorothy. This is just consequences catching up." The other neighbors actually laughed while an 80-year-old woman picked through the ruins of her life. Dorothy found it then, under a broken picture frame, Thomas's Purple Heart medal, mud-caked but intact, the purple ribbon faded but still recognizable. She held it tight in her fist, tears finally coming. Not from Patricia's cruelty, she'd learned long ago that small people need someone to feel superior to. from remembering Thomas's face when he'd shown her this medal, saying it wasn't for bravery, just for surviving when better men hadn't. "You survived too, Thomas," she whispered to the medal, to his ghost. "Survived the war, built our home with your hands, raised our babies here. You deserved better than this ending. So much better." 200 kilometers away, Marcus Stone sat in the Steel Pilgrims clubhouse, surrounded by brothers who'd ridden through the night from 3 neighboring states. The room smelled of coffee and leather and purpose. Maps covered every available surface. Phones rang constantly. By midnight Sunday, 600 bikers knew Dorothy Williams's name and story. By 3 a.m., 1,200. By dawn, Monday, 1,800, and they were coming. Patricia Henderson was having her morning coffee on the porch, feeling satisfied about the world and her place in it when she first heard it. A low rumble, distant, like thunder rolling across the plains beyond the horizon, except the sky was clear blue, not a cloud anywhere. She frowned, set down her cup on the wicker table. Probably construction equipment from tornado cleanup crews, she thought. Nothing to worry about. In fact, she felt quite pleased this morning. The demolition crew would arrive in exactly 2 hours. By noon, Dorothy Williams's eyesore would be gone, erased, forgotten. She'd already called 3 real estate agents about making an offer on the empty lot. Prime location. She'd flip it within 6 months for pure profit. The rumble grew louder, continuous now, not stopping. Sarah Peterson stepped out of her house next door, baby Emma on her hip, face confused. "Patricia, do you hear that sound? What is that?" "Just construction equipment," Patricia waved dismissively, annoyed at the interruption. "Don't worry yourself about it." But it wasn't stopping. It was growing, building, swelling like a wave approaching shore. The sound was continuous now, rhythmic, like a massive heartbeat. Not mechanical, not construction, something else entirely. Something alive and massive and unstoppable. Windows began to rattle, not violently. Just a subtle vibration that made the glass hum in the frames. The coffee in Patricia's cup rippled in perfect concentric circles, spreading from the center like something from a science experiment. "That's definitely not construction," Sarah said, voice tight with growing concern, baby starting to fuss. Other neighbors emerged, drawn by the strange sound and vibration. The Martinez family, all 5 of them. Old Mr. Chen, 82 years old, leaning on his cane, the Johnsons, the Yamadas, the Kowalskis, all standing in yards, looking around confused, searching for the source. The sound was everywhere now, a deep primal roar that seemed to come from the earth itself, from the air, from inside their chests. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was pressure, vibration, something you felt in your bones. Patricia's porch railing started to vibrate under her hand. She touched it, felt the hum traveling through wood and nails and into her palm, up her arm. What the hell was happening? Do you know what happens when 1,800 people decide justice matters more than convenience? You're about to witness something that only occurs once in a generation. The demolition crew's truck rounded the corner right on schedule and stopped dead in the middle of the street. The driver's door flew open. A man in a bright yellow hard hat stepped out, staring down the street toward the sound with his mouth hanging open, face pale. Patricia followed his gaze, heart suddenly hammering for reasons she couldn't articulate. The street was ending. Not physically ending, but visually disappearing. 2 blocks away, everything vanished behind a wall of solid black. A mass that stretched from curb to curb, building to building, blocking out everything, moving, coming closer, coming toward them. "Oh my God," someone whispered, voice small and terrified. The wall resolved as it approached, details emerging like a photograph developing. Not a wall. People, hundreds of them, no, thousands, on motorcycles, wearing black leather that creaked and gleamed. Chrome catching the morning sun like a million mirrors, a river of steel and humanity flowing toward them like an unstoppable tide, like destiny made physical. The sound was deafening now, overwhelming. 1,800 engines, each one a controlled explosion of power repeated dozens of times per second, synchronized into one massive roar that shook the ground beneath their feet. Patricia felt it through her shoes, through her legs, rattling her rib cage, making her heart flutter irregularly. The lead riders came into sharp focus, massive men on massive machines, patches on their backs, Steel Pilgrims in silver letters that seemed to glow, flags mounted on handlebars snapping in the wind they created, American flags, POWMIA flags, military unit insignia. These weren't random bikers. This was organized, coordinated, military precise, an army. They kept coming and coming, the entire street filled with motorcycles, riders shoulder to shoulder like cavalry. Then the next street filled. Then the next. An ocean of leather and chrome and purpose that swallowed every inch of pavement, every parking spot, every driveway. The sound was physical now, pressing against eardrums, making teeth vibrate. Patricia's legs went weak. She grabbed the railing for support, knuckles white. Her carefully constructed world, her petition with 37 signatures, her $7,000 lawyer, her righteous crusade against the eyesore property, suddenly felt very, very small, insignificant, childish. The lead rider stopped directly in front of Dorothy's demolished property. He raised one gloved hand. In perfect military synchronization, like a drill team that had practiced for years, 1,800 engines shut off simultaneously. The silence that followed was somehow louder than the noise. It pressed against eardrums, made the world feel too big and too small at once. 17 families stood frozen in their yards like statues, coffee cups forgotten, faces drained of color. The lead rider removed his helmet slowly, deliberately. Gray beard braided with leather. Weathered face that had seen things that would break normal people, eyes that burned with purpose. He looked directly at Patricia Henderson, and she felt her bladder nearly let go. "I'm Marcus Stone," his voice carried across the silent street like a judge pronouncing sentence. "President of Steel Pilgrims, Central Region. We're here for Dorothy Williams." Patricia's voice came out as a humiliating squeak. She doesn't live here anymore. You need to leave. I have a restraining order. We know exactly where she is," Marcus interrupted calmly, voice hard as steel. "And we know what you did, what you all did." He turned to address the entire neighborhood, voice rising. 17 families couldn't look away, trapped by guilt and fear and something else. Shame. 5 days ago, during the worst tornado in 30 years, Dorothy Williams saved 25 of our brothers, opened her basement while the world ended, gave shelter to strangers when everyone else. He gestured at the houses, at the closed doors, at the people who'd turned away, when everyone else closed their doors and hid. His voice grew harder, colder. "And what did you do? Her neighbors? People she baked Christmas cookies for every December, whose children she taught to read when schools failed them, whose pets she watched for free when you vacationed. You turned your backs, filmed her suffering like entertainment, hired lawyers to keep us away, accelerated her eviction while she slept in a shelter." Patricia wanted to speak, to explain, to defend herself, but words wouldn't come. Her throat was closed. Marcus continued, each word hitting like a hammer. "Dorothy Williams's late husband, Sergeant Thomas Williams, United States Army, saved my father's life in Vietnam 52 years ago. Pulled him from a burning vehicle under enemy fire outside Da Nang. My father spent 30 years searching for Sergeant Williams, trying to say, thank you. Never found him. My dad passed away 5 years ago with that debt unpaid, with that gratitude unexpressed." He pulled out a faded photograph, held it up. Even from across the street, Patricia could see 2 young soldiers, one pulling another from flames. "Yesterday we found out. And today," he looked around at 1,800 bikers standing at attention, "today we're paying it, not because we have to, because honor actually means something, because debts matter, because some of us still believe in doing what's right even when it's hard." A second biker stepped forward, older, face scarred from old burns. "Ray Morrison, Oklahoma City chapter president. We've got 1,800 members here right now, another 2,247 states monitoring this situation, ready to mobilize if needed. We've raised $73,000 in 26 hours. We've got licensed contractors, electricians, plumbers, roofers, painters. We've got supply trucks arriving in." He checked his watch. 43 minutes. A third biker stepped up, younger. Jake, the one Dorothy had comforted in the basement, his voice shook with emotion. "We're rebuilding her house, from the foundation up, better than before, code compliant, storm resistant, built to last another 50 years. and we're paying off every single cent she owes anyone. Cash, today, all of it. The demolition crew foreman approached cautiously, hard hat in hands, voice uncertain. Listen, I've got orders to demolish this structure at 0600. I need to cancel them, Marcus said flatly, voice allowing no argument. There's nothing to demolish. This property is under new ownership as of 0800 this morning. Steel Pilgrims' legal team bought the mortgage from Riverside Bank, paid $114,000, cash, signed and filed with the county clerk at dawn. Dorothy Williams owns this land free and clear. Forever. Patricia felt the world tilt sideways. You can't. That's not legal. You can't just. It's done, Ray said, pulling folded papers from his jacket. Signed by Bank President Samuel Morrison at 0745 this morning. Notarized, filed, public record. You want to verify? County clerk's office opens in 20 minutes. Be our guest. Mr. Martinez stepped forward hesitantly, shame written across his face. Is Dorothy okay? Where is she? Is she safe? Marcus's expression softened slightly. She's safe. At the Red Cross shelter on 5th Street. On her way here now. Should arrive in, he checked his phone, about 8 minutes. Sarah Peterson, baby Emma still on her hip, started crying. Real tears, not performance. I should have helped her. God, I should have. What kind of person am I? She babysat my kids for free, and I signed that petition. I signed it without even thinking. What did we do? One by one, the neighbors' faces crumbled. The righteous certainty that had carried them through 6 months of petition signing and door closing dissolved like sugar in rain. The Johnsons clutched each other. The Chens looked at the ground. Even young couples who'd moved in recently who barely knew Dorothy but had signed Patricia's petition anyway because everyone else did, looked sick with guilt. Patricia Henderson stood alone in her righteousness, watching it crack and splinter around her. The lawyer she'd hired for $7,000. The petition with 37 signatures she'd collected door to door. The satisfied smile as Dorothy's house was destroyed. All of it turned to ash in her mouth. Why, she whispered, voice breaking. Why would you do all this for one old woman? She's nobody. She's just... Because she did it for us, Marcus interrupted, voice sharp as broken glass. Because when the storm came and everyone else saw strangers and danger and reasons to close doors, she saw human beings who needed help. And she helped. Without hesitation, without calculation, without asking what she'd get in return. That's called humanity, Mrs. Henderson. That's called grace. That's what you should have done. What you all should have done. A white van pulled up behind the ocean of motorcycles, Red Cross logo on the side. Linda, the shelter worker, climbed out first, then helped Dorothy Williams from the passenger seat with gentle hands. Dorothy stood on the curb in donated clothes 2 sizes too big, holding a plastic bag with $7.32 and 1 Purple Heart medal. She looked at the ocean of motorcycles filling her street like a metallic tide. At 1,800 bikers standing at perfect attention, at her neighbors frozen in yards, faces twisted with shame. At Patricia Henderson, crying now, self-righteousness finally shattered. Her eyes found Marcus, held his gaze. Son, her voice was steady despite everything. What have you done? Marcus walked toward her slowly, respectfully, like approaching something sacred. 1,800 bikers remained perfectly still behind him. Not a sound, not a movement, just quiet respect for an 80-year-old woman who'd shown them what honor looked like. Ma'am, Marcus's voice was gentle, we're paying a debt, one that's 52 years, 3 months, and 14 days overdue. Dorothy looked confused, this tiny woman dwarfed by mountains of leather and steel. I don't understand. I never met you before that tornado. Marcus pulled out the photograph with shaking hands. The faded image from Vietnam, edges worn from his father's handling. Young Sergeant Thomas Williams pulling a bleeding soldier from a burning vehicle, flames in the background, enemy fire kicking up dirt around them. He handed it to Dorothy like passing over something holy. That's your husband, Marcus said, voice breaking. And that's my father, James Stone. Highway 1 outside Da Nang, April 1973. Your Thomas saved my dad's life. Pulled him out while rounds were still incoming, while the fuel tank was about to explode. Dad talked about Sergeant Williams until the day he passed away 5 years ago. said he owed that man everything. Spent 30 years trying to find him, to say thank you. Never could. Dorothy's fingers traced the photograph, trembling. Thomas's face, so impossibly young. Before the gray hair and quiet years. Before the nightmares he'd never talked about. Back when he was the hero she'd only known through letters written on blood-stained paper. If this story has moved you, subscribe now, because what happens next will restore your faith in humanity when you need it most. Thomas never talked about the war, Dorothy whispered. He said he was just doing his job, just surviving. He was doing more than that, ma'am. He gave my father 41 more years of life, gave me a dad who taught me about honor and brotherhood and paying debts no matter how long it takes. And now, Marcus's voice broke completely. Now I finally get to pay that debt to you. Your husband's legacy doesn't end with the demolished house, Mrs. Williams. It ends with this, with family taking care of family across generations. Dorothy's legs buckled. Jake and 2 other bikers caught her gently, supported her with surprising tenderness, helped her to a folding chair that appeared from somewhere. Dorothy sat, photograph clutched to her chest, tears streaming down her weathered face. 53 years of loneliness, of carrying Thomas's memory alone, of believing his sacrifices had been forgotten by everyone except her. It all poured out in silent sobs that shook her thin shoulders. We bought your mortgage from Riverside Bank this morning, Ray Morrison explained, kneeling beside her chair like a knight before a queen. Paid $114,000 cash at 0700. The house, the land, the mineral rights, everything. It's yours, free and clear. No payments, no debt, no banks, forever. But I can't. I don't have money to pay you back. Dorothy couldn't form complete sentences. You don't owe us anything, Marcus said firmly, voice allowing no argument. This is what Thomas Williams's sacrifice earned. This is what saving 25 of our brothers earned. You're Steel Pilgrims family now, ma'am, and family doesn't let family sleep in shelters. Supply trucks rumbled up one after another, flatbeds loaded with lumber that smelled of fresh pine, tools that gleamed in the sunlight, building materials stacked and organized with military precision. Licensed contractors climbed out, all wearing Steel Pilgrims patches under their work gear, all volunteering their time and expertise. A woman biker stepped forward, 40-something, covered in tattoos that told stories, but her eyes were impossibly kind. Mrs. Williams, I'm Angela Chen, licensed architect, 23 years experience. I've drawn up plans for your new house based on photographs your neighbors provided. Same footprint as Thomas's original design, but reinforced. Storm shelter built into the basement with steel-reinforced walls. Solar panels for energy independence. Triple-pane, impact-resistant windows. Everything up to 2025 building codes. Want to see? She unrolled blueprints on a portable table that materialized from somewhere. Dorothy stared at detailed drawings of her house. Thomas's house, reborn. Better. Stronger. Built to survive the next 100 years of storms and time and whatever else the world threw at it. How long? Dorothy whispered, running her fingers over the blueprints like reading Braille. 14 days, working round the clock in 8-hour shifts. We've got 412 volunteers with construction skills taking rotations. Electricians, plumbers, roofers, painters, finish carpenters, all licensed and insured, all volunteering their time because you earned it. Dorothy looked at the ruins of her home, looked at 1,800 bikers who'd ridden from 47 states for a woman they'd never met, looked at $73,000 raised in one day by strangers who owed her nothing except honor. I don't deserve this, she said quietly, voice small. Marcus knelt in front of her, took her wrinkled hands in his massive scarred ones. Ma'am, you opened your basement door when everyone else closed theirs. You held Jake's hand when a grown man was terrified. You showed us grace when you had every reason to be bitter. If you don't deserve this, then nobody in this world deserves anything good. Patricia Henderson watched from her porch, entire universe collapsing around her. She'd spent 6 months on that petition, 37 signatures collected door to door, $7,000 on a lawyer to draft restraining orders, months of self-righteous crusading to remove one old woman who made the neighborhood look bad. And in less than 30 hours, Steel Pilgrims had raised $73,000, mobilized 1,800 people, bought a house, organized construction, brought lawyers and contractors and supplies, not for profit, not for publicity, for honor, for a debt 52 years old, for a woman who'd shown kindness to strangers. Sarah Peterson approached Dorothy slowly, baby Emma on her hip, tears streaming down her face. "Mrs. Williams, I'm so sorry. You babysat my kids for free when I lost my job. You never asked for anything back. You never even mentioned it. And when you needed us most, I signed that petition. I turned my back. I'm so sorry." Dorothy reached up with one hand, touched Sarah's tear-stained cheek with surprising gentleness. "It's all right, honey. We all make mistakes." "It's not all right," Sarah sobbed, Emma starting to cry in sympathy. "I betrayed you. We all betrayed you. We don't deserve your forgiveness." "Maybe not," Dorothy said softly. "But I'm giving it anyway. That's what Thomas would have done. That's what these bikers are doing for me, giving something that's not earned but needed. Grace isn't about deserving, sweetheart. It's about choosing love when hate would be easier." One by one, neighbors approached. The Martinez family with homemade tamales, hands shaking as they offered them. The Johnsons with tools, asking where they could help. The Chens with bottled water for the work crews. Mr. Chen, 82 years old, insisted on working alongside the bikers, said he owed Dorothy for 10 years of borrowed sugar and kind words and human connection that had kept him alive after his wife passed. Marcus noticed Patricia still standing alone on her porch, isolated in her crumbling righteousness. He walked over, boots heavy on the sidewalk. "Mrs. Henderson," he said calmly, no anger in his voice now, just statement of fact. "You can't stop this. You can call more lawyers, file more petitions, try more tactics. But 1,800 bikers didn't ride here to be intimidated. We came to pay a debt and honor a woman who deserves better than what you gave her." Patricia lifted her chin defiantly. Last defense of ego. "This is illegal. You're intimidating us. I'll call the police." "We have every permit required," Marcus interrupted, still calm. "Construction permits filed Friday, approved Saturday. Assembly permits, noise permits, all legal, all documented. Your lawyer can verify if you'd like to waste more money. The police have already been notified and approved our plans. The mayor's office sent an official letter of support. You have no legal recourse, Mrs. Henderson. What you have is a choice. Join your neighbors in helping or stand alone in your judgment. Either way, Dorothy Williams is getting her home back." By noon, debris was cleared. By 3 p.m., foundation work had begun, cement trucks pouring reinforced concrete. By sunset, the skeleton of walls was rising, frame taking shape against orange sky. Neighbors who'd signed the petition found themselves working alongside bikers, hammering nails, carrying lumber, painting, trying to earn forgiveness through sweat and blistered hands. Dorothy sat in her folding chair, watching her home resurrect from ruins like Lazarus from the tomb. Jake brought her lemonade every hour. Angela showed her paint samples and tile choices. Marcus sat beside her at one point, both quiet, watching the sunset over the construction, over this miracle neither of them could fully process. "Your Thomas was a good man," Marcus said softly. "The best man," Dorothy agreed. "Would have liked you very much, I think. He always said the measure of a person isn't appearance or background, but what they do when nobody's watching. When it costs them something to be kind." Marcus smiled. "My father said the same thing. Said Sergeant Williams taught him that in about 30 seconds under enemy fire. Some lessons only take moments to teach, but lifetimes to understand." That night, Dorothy slept in a hotel. Not a shelter, but a real hotel, with clean sheets that smelled of lavender, hot water that didn't run out, room service she'd never order because it seemed too expensive. But it was there, available. Because she was family now. Because 1,800 people had decided she mattered. The house rose over 14 days like a phoenix from ash. By day 7, walls stood solid. By day 10, roof complete, windows installed. By day 14, the exterior was finished, painted the exact shade of yellow Thomas had chosen 53 years ago. Dorothy had shown Angela a faded photograph, and Angela had matched it perfectly, finding the old paint formula and recreating it. Inside, everything new but familiar. Kitchen with modern appliances Dorothy had only seen in magazines. Bathroom with walk-in shower, safety bars disguised as decorative fixtures, everything designed for aging with dignity. Living room with Thomas's restored Purple Heart displayed in a custom case on the mantel, lit softly. Her wedding photo, professionally restored and framed, hanging above it. The past honored, the future secured. On day 14, Marcus held a final meeting. 1,800 bikers, 400 volunteers, 17 neighborhood families who'd worked to earn redemption. Tomorrow Dorothy moves home, Marcus announced, but today I want you to understand why this mattered, why we dropped everything to ride here, why 1,800 of us spent 2 weeks building instead of working or being with our own families. He held up his father's Purple Heart, identical to Thomas's, both earned with blood and sacrifice. My father carried 2 weights his entire adult life: gratitude for being saved by a stranger, guilt for never finding that stranger to say thank you. He died 5 years ago still carrying both weights, still searching for Sergeant Thomas Williams, still wanting to express something he couldn't put into words but felt in every heartbeat for 41 years. Marcus's voice broke. I inherited those weights, that debt written in blood and gratitude and unpaid honor. And when I met Dorothy Williams, when I watched her show grace under cruelty, kindness to strangers, courage when everyone else showed cowardice, I knew my father was watching somehow, knew he'd guided me to that exact spot at that exact moment, not coincidence, providence, destiny, whatever you want to call it. He looked at Dorothy, eyes wet. Ma'am, my father can't thank your husband face to face, but I can thank you. Not just for saving my brothers from a tornado, for showing us what Thomas Williams's legacy really was. Not a house, not medals. You, your grace, your kindness even when the world was cruel. That's what survives. That's what matters. That's what we're honoring. Dorothy stood slowly, joints protesting, walked to Marcus. This tiny 80-year-old woman and this massive tattooed biker who looked like nightmares but had the gentlest soul. She took his bearded face in both wrinkled hands, looked into his eyes. Your father and my Thomas are together now, she said with absolute certainty, probably sharing a beer, laughing about all this fuss we're making. And you know what Thomas would say? He'd say, that Marcus Stone, good man. His daddy raised him right. Proud of him. That's exactly what he'd say. Marcus broke down. This president of the largest motorcycle club in America, who'd faced down gangs and violence and death without flinching, wept in the arms of an elderly woman who'd shown him what his father's sacrifice had truly meant, how it rippled across decades to save her the way Thomas had saved his father. Around them, 1,800 bikers stood silent, many crying, all understanding they'd witnessed something transcendent. Not just construction, not just charity. Honor passing between generations like an Olympic torch, debt paid not with money but with love and sweat and collective will. Day 15 arrived with a sunrise Thomas would have loved, gold and pink and crimson painting the sky like watercolors. Dorothy stood across the street from her home, Marcus beside her. 1,800 bikers formed in ceremonial lines that stretched for blocks. The house gleamed. Perfect yellow paint glowing in morning light. New roof designed to withstand Category 5 tornadoes. Windows that sparkled. Porch rebuilt exactly as Thomas had designed it 53 years ago, down to the angle of the railings and the grain of the wood, but reinforced with steel hidden inside to last generations. Ready, ma'am? Marcus asked gently. Dorothy couldn't speak, could only nod, tears already streaming. They walked together up the path, this unlikely pair. Elderly black woman and massive white biker, connected by sacrifice and honor across 52 years. Each step felt like walking through a dream. 2 weeks ago, she'd owned nothing but donated clothes in a plastic bag. Today, she owned a house worth $200,000, debt-free, had $50,000 in trust-generating income, had medical bills erased, had a family of 2,000 bikers across 50 states who'd proven they'd move heaven and earth for her. The front door, new oak, hand-carved by a biker named Thomas Jr., who'd wanted to honor the original Thomas, swung open on silent hinges. Inside, Dorothy gasped, hand over mouth. Her furniture, destroyed by the tornado, had been replaced with exact replicas. Angela's team had worked from photographs, recreating Thomas's favorite reading chair where he'd sat every evening, the coffee table he'd built in their garage one winter, the bookshelf where family photos had sat. Everything returned, everything remembered, like stepping back in time but forward into hope simultaneously. But more than that, thoughtful additions, state-of-the-art medical alert system disguised as decorative light fixtures, grab bars throughout but designed to look like towel racks and decorative elements, non-slip flooring that looked like hardwood, every detail considered for an 80-year-old woman living alone, but done so tastefully, she'd never feel diminished or reminded of age and fragility. On the kitchen counter, a leather-bound book. Dorothy opened it with trembling hands. Inside, 2,043 signatures, every Steel Pilgrim who'd contributed, financially, physically, emotionally. Each one had signed their name and written a personal note. "Welcome home, Dorothy. You're my hero. Jake Rodriguez, Dallas chapter. Your husband saved lives, so did you. Thank you for showing us what matters. Angela Chen, Phoenix. Family forever. You'll never be alone again. Ray Morrison, Oklahoma City." 2,000 voices saying in ink and honesty, "You matter. You're valued. You're protected. You're loved." Dorothy sank into Thomas's chair, the replica so perfect she could almost smell his cologne, feel his presence, and wept. Not from sadness, from overwhelming gratitude, from understanding that Thomas's one act of courage, 52 years ago, had created ripples that traveled through time and space and human connection to reach her in her darkest moment and save her the way he'd saved so many. The Steel Pilgrims had established the Dorothy Williams Emergency Fund for elderly people facing eviction, medical crises, situations like hers. Within 1 year, it helped 97 people across 32 states. Patricia Henderson became its biggest donor, spending her retirement trying to earn redemption she'd never fully feel she deserved. The Riverside neighborhood transformed from a subdivision of strangers into genuine community. Block parties became monthly traditions, neighbors knew each other's names and stories. And Dorothy? She lived. Truly lived. Visited Steel Pilgrims chapters across the country, spoke at events about kindness and community. Became grandmother to hundreds of bikers' children who called her Grandma Dorothy. Found purpose in her 80s that she'd lost in loneliness. When Dorothy Williams passed away peacefully 5 years later at 85, 2,300 Steel Pilgrims attended her funeral. They lined streets for miles, engines silent, heads bowed, honoring her the way warriors honor fallen queens. Marcus Stone gave the eulogy, voice steady despite the tears, explaining how one woman's kindness during a storm had transformed thousands of lives, taught them that grace is stronger than judgment, that love always defeats fear. They buried Dorothy next to Thomas. Her funeral cost nothing. 2,000 family members covered every expense, competed to contribute. Her legacy, though? Priceless and eternal. The house still stands today, maintained by Steel Pilgrims as a living symbol. They call it Dorothy's Place. Young bikers visit to hear the story, understand why their brotherhood exists, not for rebellion, but for protection, for helping, for being people who open doors when others close them. And every year on the tornado's anniversary, 1,800 motorcycles still line that street, create that wall of sound and steel and honor, remind the neighborhood and the world that one woman's kindness created a family that we'll never forget. Because Dorothy Williams didn't just open a basement door. She opened hearts and minds and possibilities, proved that grace is stronger than judgment, that inclusion is braver than exclusion, that loving strangers might be the most revolutionary act in a world teaching fear. Thomas Williams saved one man in Vietnam. Dorothy Williams saved thousands through simple, relentless, unshakable kindness. And the ripples continue spreading, touching people who'll never know their names but feel their impact. In moments when they choose compassion over convenience, when they open doors instead of closing them, when they remember that honor and family and love are the only things that truly survive death and time and change. That's what happens when you choose kindness during storms. You don't just save people, you transform the world, one open door at a time.